Welcome back to World History with Dustin Fowler. In the last video, we talked about the characteristics of civilization as they applied to Mesopotamia. Now, we're going to talk about the Egyptians. Let's do that. So again, think about the SPRITE acronym, the social, political, religious, intellectual, technological, and economic elements of a civilization. We're going to break it down and look at the Egyptian civilization. And the first thing I want to do is kind of preface it with this. In Mesopotamia, their rivers kind of sucked compared to Egypt. In other words, what you see here is that these rivers in Egypt were way more consistent in terms of their flooding habits. So in Mesopotamia, the rivers just do what they wanted to do and flood and screw everything up. But in Egypt, they were very, very consistent like clockwork. Sometimes they would flood a little bit too much, which would cause some problems, but for the most part, Egypt was extremely lucky. Still did depend a lot on irrigation, but they were able to make their farms go very much along the Nile River. Even today, if you look at Google Earth, you can kind of see the green and the lush fertility around the Nile River Valley, which made it very, very useful in terms of agricultural production. Another thing we want to think about in terms of the natural physical environment around Egypt is that whereas deserts on the east and the west of that river made for pretty cool natural barriers, it also kind of isolated the Egyptians and caused them to have to live on a very, very small area of land. For the most part, the majority of the ancient civilization lived along the Nile River Delta in the north. Looking at the political situation and the power and politics in the region, pharaohs called all the shots. Now, in the same way as the Mesopotamians were very, very much a polytheistic civilization, these guys also believed in the existence of many gods. You had this movie, The Gods of Egypt, that just came out and did horrible. It flopped in terms of the box office, even though it looks awesome. I haven't seen it yet. They also considered their pharaoh to be a god in the form of a human. In fact, he was the reincarnation of a god himself. Since they believed in the godhood of their leader, this is a form of government called theocracy, which is definitely a word you need to know. It means rule by religion, or rule in which you believe that either religion calls the shots or that your leader is a god in the form of a human. Probably something that we could consider maybe the closest thing to an actual theocracy in this sense today is maybe with North Korea, where they may very well feel in or believe in the divinity of Kim Jong-un. North Korea defined as a theocracy, though, is debatable. Looking at religion and going a little bit further with the polytheism, they also believed in the afterlife, which is a pretty common thing. It's really not very normal for people to live and watch their friends and loved ones die and not question what is beyond. And so really, when you think about the existence of afterlife and how it kind of manifests itself across religions, across forms of religion, across geographies, it really does kind of make sense that they would believe in such a thing. And social stratification, which is class systems, also played an increasingly important role in terms of where you would go after you died. For example, they believed that whatever you're buried with in terms of your body, in terms of your wealth and your food, anything of that nature would go with you into the next world, which is why they would serve the elites by burying them as mummies, mummification, burying them in very, very exquisite and ornate tombs, or even pyramids later on, as you guys know about the Great Pyramids in Giza. They believed that these people would go off into the afterlife and have these things. Unfortunately, mummification and being buried with all your priceless goods was something that was only reserved for the elites and not for everyone else like me and you, so we'd be up the creek without a paddle. This is also a reason why they would produce traps and things like that to try to prevent people from being able to rob graves, because they thought that was the ultimate low. If you went in and you took all their possessions, then what are the person going to have in the afterlife? If you destroyed their body, well, that person's going to be wandering as a lifeless spirit for all eternity, and that's not really cool. In terms of the intellectual capacity of this civilization, these guys also had a writing system which was known as hieroglyphics. We were able to decipher hieroglyphics because Napoleon found the Rosetta Stone, which includes hieroglyphics also with Greek and other languages. We were able to decipher, and we were able to translate a lot of the hieroglyphics and figure out what the Egyptians were writing down. Very, very similar actually to some of the things the Mesopotamians would have written down. They also were great astronomers, as were many ancient ancient civilizations. When you gotta think, I mean, at night when it gets all dark, what are you gonna do other than look straight up and observe over time the consistency of the stars in the sky? And so they would use these stars in the sky to help them figure out when the floods were gonna come for the Nile and help them to invent a calendar. Here's a crazy thing about this calendar the Egyptians were able to devise, and that is it was a 365-day calendar that was only off by about 6 hours. They didn't account for the leap year. Every 4 years, if you multiply 6 times 4, you're gonna get 24 hours. They were unable to account for that leap year because, I mean, come on, y'all, that's really not easy to know. And so every year there's actually 365 days plus 6 hours, which is the reason why we have our leap year, where we add an extra day to kind of keep the balance. Also, the Egyptians were one of the first groups to actually do surgeries. You can see where they might have actually done surgeries on the head, or maybe surgeries on the brain or whatnot, in order to alleviate certain symptoms, certain sicknesses like disease or fever, or God knows only what else. I couldn't imagine how much that would have hurt. They also knew how to check for pulse. They would even set bones that were broken. In terms of technology, they were able to use ramps and geometry to build awesome structures like the pyramids we're so familiar with. They had sculptures and things of this nature that they were able to do that shows the artistic side of their architecture. It is also worth noting that they depended upon slave and peasant labor for a lot of the things that they had to build. A lot of the slaves were captured people from neighboring empires or neighboring groups that they might have gone to war with, and sometimes you couldn't really tell the difference between slaves and peasants. In fact, oftentimes slaves were even able to rise up the ranks and have very high positions within some of your Egyptian elites. And the example of Joseph in the Bible is a great example for demonstrating this point. Egyptians had certain games that they would play for recreation and entertainment, and both men and women wore makeup. And finally, ending with the economics, these guys were doing trade with not only other groups within the Nile Valley area, but also they may have done trade as far north as Mesopotamia for many of the resources that they lacked. They also built tons of stone structures. Sometimes they will have had to borrow stone or trade for those things. Sometimes also they might have even traded food or weapons for different things that they would need as well. In this video, we talked about Egypt in Sprite. We applied an understanding of the characteristics of civilization to understanding exactly what made these people unique and how they were also similar to the Mesopotamians. If you liked the video, I hope you guys will like and subscribe. Feel free to share my stuff with other people and let them know what's going on. Thank you very much. See you next time.